Good afternoon, everybody. It's Tom Christie back in the carving shop, and I want to start a new project. This is going to be a gunning Drake Wigeon, and it will be a hunting style bird, so relatively simple in carving, not a lot of detail. We want to keep it strong so that it holds up in a hunting environment. I've got my blocks selected. I am going to carve this out of tupelo. You may want to choose a different wood like cedar for a gunning decoy. This is what I've got, so I'm going to use my tupelo for this project. I will hollow the bird out to make it nice and light and make it float well. It's kind of a tucked head position, so I'm looking forward to doing this bird. We'll do the bird from beginning to end, so I'm going to show you every step along the way in terms of carving, the way I do it anyway. And then we'll move into the painting series and we'll do a relatively simple gunning paint job on this Drake Wigeon. If you're enjoying my channel and getting value out of it, please hit the subscribe button. That really helps me out. It doesn't cost anything. I want to provide this content free to people who might be interested in carving their own decoys, or just get for working decoys for hunting, or for riding the mantle, or for gifting to another person, or for your own benefit. Just the joy of making something with your hands, I really think is, and being a craftsman, I think is an important thing, and I want to contribute to teaching other people how to do that. So I am going to bandsaw this bird out. Some of my videos I jump ahead and go ahead and cut out the bird, but I think we'll take this step by step, since some of you out there may want to just do a Drake Wigeon from beginning to end, so we'll get started that way. So I've got my patterns made, and if you haven't seen how to make a pattern, I've got videos. If you just hit the magnifying glass search button within my channel, you can find a lot of different subjects. So if you put making patterns in there, it'll bring up a video to show you how I make a pattern like this: top down view, side view, head view. All right, let's get going. I get a lot of questions about, hey Tom, do you sell your patterns? And I don't make it a practice to sell my patterns, because I really want to encourage people to develop their own. And again, have put some videos together to show you how to go about that with reference photos from the internet or other places. So I'm just tracing around. This neck dips down here. I'm going to leave a little material in there because as I attach the head, depending on which position it's in, I may want a little material in that location rather than a bunch of wood filler. So this bird does not have raised primaries. I'm just keeping it simple so that it's nice and strong. So we get the pattern in that direction, and then I use a square and strike a square line up to the top of the block and across the top of the block. And that gives me alignment for the top-down pattern to line up and get that correctly positioned. I'm going to trace around that. I like to keep a center line on my birds for symmetry, so I'll do that as well. Grab a straight edge and just mark the center line. Okay, so I've got side view, top down view. We'll get that band sawed out. We need to do the same thing with the head. Same thing here. I'm going to leave a little additional room here because as I turn the head to an angle, we're going to need a little more material back there, or we'll end up with a big gap between the body and the head. This is just something you learn through experience. The other thing I want to do is mark the center of the eye, so we'll get that positioned correctly. All right, now we can bandsaw. Just another note, I normally don't develop a top-down pattern of the head. I like to do that by hand, and I use patterns for the bill. So we'll go through that step by step. But the other thing I wanted to mention is I did cut this block to the width that I wanted. And I know the width on this particular position is 2.5 inches wide at the widest point. So I cut this to 2.5 inches wide. The other note is make sure everything is nice and square on your block before you start laying out straight lines and using the square. It kind of goes without saying, but Tupelo blocks normally come with a little misshapen because after they are cut and dried, the wood moves a little bit. So you need to square up your blocks before you do your layout work. All right, I'm going to speed up the video to 2x speed. Just be aware of that. You shouldn't be cutting this fast, but that way we'll get through this whole process a little quicker and you can see the whole process but not have to wait real time. Now I'm going to keep that top pattern and we're going to tack that back on and use it later. But now I'm just going back in and cutting a few of those little areas that I couldn't easily get with one pass of the bandsaw. So knock those out. Now I'm cutting the profile under the tail, and then we'll move up to the breast profile from the side. There we go. We've got the side profile set. Once I cut the side profile of the body, I put this scrap piece back on and make sure I'm lined up with my marks here so that I have this correctly positioned. And then I'm going to pick a few spots and tack this in place to hold it nice and firmly while I cut the top down pattern. Okay, speeding up the video again here, getting my blade adjusted, starting at the front and making sure I'm lined up there so I don't trim off the front of the breast. And then I'm just following that top-down profile. That's the end of the side pocket and a little bit of the rump, and then now moving into the tail area. And notice how I shifted my hands to the front of the decoy. When that tail area is undercut like it is, the bandsaw wants to pull the block down, so you need to have a firm grip as you work on the tail of a puddle duck like this to keep the block nice and on the platform. Now I'm just trimming off that end to the proper length. Okay, I've got it cut out. Now I'm just going to remove my nails. And I'm going to hang on to this scrap piece because later we're going to split the decoy and hollow it out. And this gives a great nesting saddle as we're hollowing out the decoy with the drill press. So keep that piece if you're going to hollow out the decoy. Now I want to get my center line back on the decoy, just so I keep it in mind where it is, roughly. Just following my nails since I put those in at the center line. Now I'm going to use the bandsaw and trim off a little bit underneath. I don't want to undercut this too much, but a little bit. to create a rounded look to the side pockets. And then we're going to want to remove some of this material. I do that with a bandsaw. You have to be very careful doing that. I'm just giving myself a little bit of a guideline from experience. I know I need to take off those corners down to about the center of the side pocket here. I'm going to keep that in mind. I mentioned you can use the bandsaw. You do have to be very careful because you're going to be bandsawing at angles, and you need a firm foundation, or the bandsaw can have a tendency to pull and snag. So you can choose to use a hatchet, a chisel, a Sureform tool, anything like this to round off the decoy. I'm just going to use a little bandsaw. And to do that, I'm going to set my bandsaw table at 30 degrees is what I use. Put it on an angle. Then I can use the bottom of the decoy, keep it flat on the table as I'm trimming off that angle. I'll get a little better camera angle here for the cuts. I'm going to keep this at normal speed because you need to go slowly and carefully on these angle cuts on a bandsaw. This one's not so bad because the decoy is flat on the table. But you'll see one of the cuts we do later, you're holding on to the decoy, and you just really need to be careful and keep your hands away from the blade at all times. Just kind of basic bandsaw safety. So I'm trimming off these lower edges following those guidelines that I mentioned earlier. Now I'm going to put the decoy on its side, and we want to keep a firm contact with the table and kind of slide the decoy around to maintain that contact with the table. So we're not freehanding this too much where the blade has a chance to pull. Now this second cut is the one that you need to exercise most caution because I don't have a flat surface. I have to hold the decoy at an angle. You can see I'm keeping my fingers and hands way away from the blade just in case it would snag and pull. And that's about all I want to do is take that much wood off with the bandsaw. It just saves a lot of time grinding wood away with these two cuts on an angle. Last cut, again, being very cautious, and you want to go slowly on these cuts. Okay, that's about all I want to do with the bandsaw. That gets me started on rounding the decoy. Just give you a quick look at those cuts. We've got kind of a rounded shape established. Now I'm going to, this is at 2 times speed, by the way. I'm going to cut the side profile on the head. And I always start at the tip of the bill because it's so easy to trim off too much wood with a bandsaw, and we want to leave that tip, the shape that we establish with the pattern, intact. So I'm just slowly cutting around the profile. We'll just speed through this. Now I want to drill a through hole for the eye position, not as the final diameter, but as a guideline for carving later. And I'm just using the pattern to mark both sides. and then we'll take that over to the drill press. I've just got like a 1/8 inch diameter drill bit. That way we'll have a reference to later after the carving is done of where those eye positions should be. All right, just a quick shot of the bandsawed head and body roughed out. And now we'll do some layout work on the head. I normally like to work on the head first and get that shaped up. I'm going to start the layout work by putting a center line on the head. So just measuring the center point and then striking a line all around the head profile. And this to me is critical because it is the profile of the bird that we work so hard to put together in the pattern and convey the character of the bird. So we don't want to lose this line in the carving process. When I'm done carving, I want this line to still be intact until I sand it off at the end. Because if I gouge into this line, I've started to lose the profile of the bird, and that'll be a problem, especially from a distance. You start to lose the character of the bird with weird shapes. All right, so I've got that laid out. Now I can use the pattern that I've created. Basically created that from a study bill to give myself the shape of the bird's bill. And I'll get that laid on there. Now I'm going to use my dividers in my pattern to measure the length from the tip of the bill to the cheek. This is my study bill. I just want to make sure and it's right on. The only reason I mention that is study bills do tend to vary in size a little bit, as do the natural birds. So I want to make sure my pattern lines up with the study bill that I have, and it does. So I can use the study bill for all my dimensions going forward. So I'm going to strike a line on the decoy here where that cheek meets the bill. And then make a line there, because I like to use a coping saw to cut this out, and I'm using the bandsaw lines to just kind of transfer that dimension squarely across. Same thing down here. Okay, so I'm going to use my coping saw and very carefully remove this material. Then we're going to cut back, normally a little past the eye here. And then from the top down, we're going to take some wood off here. This is going to come to a fairly sharp point in back, but not razor sharp on this widgeon, because this crest tends to gather up into a narrow area at back. Okay, and I did put the bill dimensions or pattern on the bottom as well, so that when I'm coping, I can look top and bottom and make sure my coping saw is not getting off track and I'm taking off too much material underneath. I like to then drop some verticals, and I just do this by hand these days and not spend too much time, but that's going to give me a guideline where my coping saw needs to exit. And let's make sure that lines up on both sides. This is kind of rough. You can tell by the way I'm speeding through this. So we're going to take this off, this, and this to give us that shape from the top. Get the bill formed up. Know exactly where the bill meets the face, because that determines the length of the bill, and that's one of the key things that'll get you off track quicker than anything. If you make a widgeon's bill too long or too short and stubby, it's just going to look unnatural. So that dimension is pretty critical. And if you've watched my other videos, you've heard that before. So a lot of this is going to be repeat, and I apologize for that. But for those of you watching this video for the first time, it's worth repeating. Okay, now I'm going to use my coping saw, and the reason I use coping saw is you can use a band saw here, but the band saw is a very aggressive and kind of wider blade than this, and I like going slow on this critical dimension to make sure that I have it right. I'm cutting just outside the pattern line because I'm going to need to sand to smooth things out after I make these cuts. So I want a little extra material there. Now I'm cutting down to that line that we've determined where the cheek meets the face, and I like to go in from the side and meet up with that line very carefully so we don't gouge the bill here. I'll do this side, you may be able to see it a little better. So just outside the line, square top and bottom. Slow down when you get to the cheek. Now I'm going to follow this line and take it right into the cheek. Very careful. Okay, that sets these lines. Now we can remove this angle back. And now I'm shooting for this guideline here. I'll speed the video up here. This is repetitious, but that way you can see the entire process. Now I'm just going to use the bandsaw to remove these because it's not as critical as the bill, and it's quicker as long as you keep a good grip on the head. Since I don't have a flat surface, really got to hang on tight here. Okay. And now for my pattern, I know the crown I want to be 1.5 inches wide. So I'm going to mark that out. And in this position, the head is wide because it's tucked down and it kind of blows the feathers out, and it's puffed up position, so I want it to be that way. But the crown, we want to maintain kind of its normal width. So I'm just sketching that in from the top as a guideline, and then I'm going to take material out right through the eye channel in this area. The other thing I want to do is give myself a guideline underneath so that I don't gouge out too much material. And I know there's going to be a little bit of return on the cheek as it matches up with the neck here. So right now I'm just kind of eyeballing it, sketching it in to give myself a guideline. As I'm rounding, I don't want to take too much material off down here. Now we need to position the notch here. It's going to be relatively in that position, but I want to do some measurements and make sure that's where it belongs, and then we'll establish the notch location. Use my calipers and get a dimension from the tip of the bill to the base or the point of the notch, and transfer that to the carving, and it is right there. And then the width, you can see it's not a sharp V. This is a study bill, so you have to use some caution and awareness of what the actual bird looks like. But it's 3/8 inch wide at the points up here, so I've transferred that on. And the other thing I would say is there's not much of a return up here on a Wigeon's bill. It's fairly straight up and down, a little bit of forward slant there. So we don't have to go too far back into the head when we carve this notch in, because we're only going to end up back about that far. Okay, I'm going to speed the video up here, and I'm using this little 1/8 inch cylindrical ruby bit and using that to take material down on either side of the notch and leave the notch high where it meets the crown. Just using the pencil to pencil it in and make sure it looks right. And now I can attach those lines, and we can work on removing material to narrow the crown. So I'm using a 3/4 inch saber-tooth burr fine carving bit here and carefully removing material. There's not much to hang on to with this tucked head position, so just a word of caution, be careful, because these saber-tooth burrs do bite. I'm just going slow. Again, I've sped the video up, so I'm not actually carving this fast, but it'll get us through the video quicker that way. So I'm just carving to match those lines, and I think I can speed through this. I'm going to do the same thing on the opposite side. And once I have it narrowed, then I'm beginning to round the cheeks of the bird. And kind of narrowing up in the front where it meets the bill, and also beginning some rounding of the bill. I'll do that same thing on the opposite side. Just pause a minute. We've got the head rough shaped, so I've taken this down, the crown down to that 1.5 inch dimension. Cheeks wide. We've got the notch located. Now I want to go in here with some detailed grinding equipment and just identify where the bill meets the face. It's got a little bit of a return back here, but not much. And then we need to mark out where the upper and lower mandible meet here and get a dimension. Try to get this in the camera. From the tip of the bill to that corner where the upper and lower meet, and transfer that to the wood so it doesn't come back a lot. Right to there. This is where, too, it's important that we maintain symmetry side to side, so we don't want this side up higher than that side, so just keep an eye on that. And so we'll remove material in this area and maintain the bill width that we have back into the face there. So I'm going to use this little 1/8 inch cylindrical ruby bit. And by the way, people have asked me, why do I use rubies instead of diamonds? To me, they're kind of interchangeable, at least the way I carve. So I've got both, and I haven't seen a huge difference between the two. So I use and they last forever. So I've had these ruby bits a long time. Okay, we'll take that material out next, and then we'll set the eye width, and we've got a little work to do underneath here to define the neck, and as it comes back, the face is going to dig down into that area. Okay, I'm using that cylindrical ruby and just removing material where we penciled it in there. And I can speed this part of the video up. Then I'm also using that to define the where the bill meets the face there. We're not going to have a ton of detail on this bill, just we want to get the shape right to begin with, and then do the rest with some paint later on. I'm just shaping that up. Now I'm switching to kind of a bullet-nosed bit, and I'm going to remove that shelf that we carved into there and just blend it into the face, and then use that to dig in and begin to define the neck as it meets the head there. So there's some undercutting to be done there, and then rounding back in. We want to give that a real tucked head look, where the feathers kind of splay out as the head gets tucked down against the breast. You can see a little shadow being cast there already. Now this is a gunning decoy, so we're not going to add nail details, nostrils. Those will be painted on. But I do want to put a little separation between the upper and lower mandible, so I'm getting a dimension from the pattern. From the tip of the bill back to where the upper and lower mandible meet. We'll do that on both sides to make sure there's symmetry. And then I'm going to put a little bit of a downward bend there. So there's not much lower mandible that shows up in a Drake Wigeon. I'm going to grab my knife. We'll put a little separation in there. Get a nice firm grip and on a nice stable surface. I'm going to push the knife in to create that little upward turn and come out, and just score this a little deeper each time. I don't know how many times I've pushed too hard and just ripped through the lower mandible, especially in Tupelo, so be cautious. Then I'm going to make a downward cut in this direction. Go down below, come in about a 1/16 of an inch, and do the same thing. Score this multiple times until you can pop out that little section. That creates just a little shadow between the upper and lower mandible, and we'll clean that up That's about all we're going to do on the bill other than sand it. Going to use this little cylinder to go in and clean up that area. Just using that little bit to clean things up and blend them back into the face in the corner there. Then as a final step, I'm going to use the knife. We're going to pencil in the lower mandible as it meets the face there. There's just a little bit of an offset. And I'm just taking some material out with the knife there so that that lower mandible is at the correct dimension, and that begins to form the V under the bill. Just cleaning it up then with the ruby bit. You can see the little V under the chin there. Now we've got it shaped up, we just need a little sanding to finish it up. Now that we have the bill kind of shaped up, I want to set this dimension between the eyes, and I know from the references that I have that it's 1 inch between the eyes from the front. So I've got my caliper set at that, and you can see it doesn't fit back to the eye. So we're going to remove material in this eye channel area on both sides. And I'll do that with this bullet-shaped ruby bit. And we don't have to take a ton out, but just enough to get this down to where it belongs. This is an area that a lot of people seem to get wrong. Either the eyes are way wide set, bug-eyed, or they're so narrow they look like they're almost touching, and it really throws off the look of the decoy. So getting that reference dimension from a pattern, or like Pat Godden's pattern books, I use all the time for that type of dimension. If you can find them, they're worth investing in. All right, I'm just gonna speed up the video here and just grinding a kind of a trench through that eye area. And that eye channel goes right up to the bill so that the bird has a line of sight down the bill to where its food is. And then I'm rounding that into the cheek and up into the crown. So we're pretty close already. Now that eye distance is set properly, I'm going to use this bullet nose saber-tooth burr to round the crown. And the crown of a Drake Wigeon is fairly round, so you don't want the square-headed look on a Wigeon. You want a nice round crown. You can see I'm leaving that center line intact again. You're sick of hearing me say that, but I just think it's so critical. We don't want to lose sight of the center line. And then I'm blending that in. The head kind of narrows as it goes back towards the larger part of the crest back there. That's a pretty good shape. Now I'm going back with a little flame-shaped ruby bit, and I just want to clean up this neck area where the bandsaw cuts are down in there and smooth that out while we're working on the head, and kind of blend that in to where it meets the head. I'll speed this up. Once I have that shaped up, I'm going to use a 1/2 inch drum sander This is probably 150 grit, and just smooth everything out. And do some final shaping with this sander as well. Just removing tool marks and getting things blended in nice lines, no shadows that cast an odd look to the head. Once we have that smoothed up with hand sanding, now I want to create some cheeks. And when the head is tucked down, particularly in a low tuck position, the feathers tend to bunch up. So we want to add a little bit of, or I like to add a little bit of character there. So I kind of go in with this bullet-shaped ruby bit, cut a trench, and then go back and blend that into the surrounding area. Then I'm going to switch to the sanding drum and just use that to kind of finish things up and blend so we don't have any remaining tool marks. Here's just a quick shot of the head after some hand sanding. And in that light, you can see just a subtle shadow cast there. And as that head tucks down, the feathers tend to bunch up and leave some wrinkles like that. So it just adds a little character. I've got some sanding yet to do there, but. All right, everybody, I think we'll call that a wrap on session 1 of carving a Drake tucked head gunning widgeon. And we've got the head pretty well shaped up. I'll do a little bit more sanding, but that's about the level of detail we're going to have on this gunner. Next time we'll put the eyes in and we'll start working to shape up the body. Again, there won't be a lot of carved feather detail in this gunning widgeon. So until next time, Tom Christie signing out. Good carving to all of you out there.